Jerusalem itself bears witness to the greatest story ever told, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. 2,000-year-old olive trees still thrive in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus agonized before his death. An ancient Roman road leads from the Kidron Valley up to the house of Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest. Stones from the fortress of Pontius Pilate bear the marks of a Roman soldier's game called King for a Day. The impact of the last days of Jesus Christ and his disciples changed the world, when, according to the Bible, Jesus became the Passover lamb to atone for the sins of the world. While some try to undermine the story, many biblical scholars say the life and death of Jesus is a matter of historical record. Darrell Bach, professor of New Testament studies at Dallas Theological Seminary, points to the Jewish historian Josephus.
Josephus, in the book called Antiquities, this is book 18, section 61 to 64, describes briefly the life of Jesus. Now, some of what he says is disputed as to whether it goes back to him, but the part that isn't disputed is that Jesus was crucified by Pontius Pilate, and then it was the Jewish leadership that was responsible for bringing him to crucifixion. And those are the base facts that correlate very nicely with the biblical story.
The biblical story runs through this road called the Via Dolorosa, or as it's known in English, the Way of the Cross. It marks the path where Pontius Pilate sent Jesus to be crucified at Golgotha, the site of the crucifixion. But in addition to Pontius Pilate, there's archaeological evidence of other people involved in the passion of Jesus, like Simon of Cyrene, who carried the cross of Jesus. Claire Fawn is an expert in early Christianity.
Both Simon of Cyrene, the father of Rufus and Alexander according to the Gospel of Mark, and Caiaphas, who was high priest at the time of Jesus and who oversaw his Jewish trial, are both independently attested by the discovery of each of their bone boxes or ossuaries. Now, it's very interesting to think that when you're looking at this event that happened on one weekend in Jerusalem, nearly 2,000 years ago, that three of the people who played significant roles in that and who are recorded in the documentary evidence are also attested to archaeologically.
Beyond archaeology, Father Jerry Murphy O'Connor, who studied the Apostle Paul and the early apostles, believes those closest to Jesus, most who died for the faith, would not have given their lives for a lie.
We can rest our faith on the resurrection of Jesus because that was the belief of his disciples, the ones who knew him, the ones who traveled with him, the one who were the witnesses of the appearances. That meant he was alive. They were the witnesses of the empty tomb, and that meant there was no body. That's why they had to say, he is risen from the dead.
I think we also cannot set aside the fact that Paul understands this to be a physical resurrection. He says, if Jesus has not been raised from the dead, then our faith is pointless, it's in vain, and everything that we're doing is futile. I don't think that Paul is talking about some type of visionary spiritual manifestation as the resurrection. He's talking about a literal physical resurrection.
While some might say that our belief in the resurrection relies on faith alone, some scholars believe we have evidence that demands a verdict.
We hear the same thing even from the pagan sources about the story that accompanies Christianity. And what we find today is that these are all being questioned again. But it's great to have things like the ossuary of Caiaphas and of Simon of Cyrene to bear witness to the fact that these stories are not just fabrications, but they really are based upon historical truth.
Ken Trestrail, a guide at Jerusalem's Garden Tomb, says the greatest benefit of the resurrection is what Jesus does for every man's soul.
The moment in time we do business with him, he takes us in his arms. His blood will deal with our sin problem, and he lifts us out of time and plants our feet with his in the heavenlies. Now here's good news in a day of bad news. 2,000 years ago, death couldn't hold Jesus. And 2,000 years on, death won't hold those of us who die in Christ Jesus.
But perhaps the greatest proof of the resurrection of Jesus Christ lies beyond the old city walls of Jerusalem It's the testimony of more than 1 billion Christians from every tongue and tribe who testify their lives have been forever changed by the resurrected Jesus. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.